I lost in the game of truth or dare. And my boyfriend forced me to eat the food in the para-student's bowl. What are you waiting for? Go quickly. I can't wait to see his furious look. Am I back 10 years ago? I walked up to the poor student, picked up a pickled radish and put it in my mouth. He raised his head, his eyes cold. Then, under everyone's gaze, I put sweet and sour spare ribs, braised pork, all into his plate. This is compensation for eating your radish. I hope you don't mind. I looked at the man who would dominate the entire technology circle in the future, smiling brightly. Hello. 17-year-old Alexander. I'm 17-year-old Isabella. It just so happened that you were self-based that year, and it also just so happened that I was bright that year. One Isabella. You lost in the game of truth or dare. Go and take a bite of the food in his bowl quickly. When I opened my eyes again, my childhood sweetheart boyfriend William was grinning and urging me to pick up food from Alexander's bowl. The wealthy friends around us all echoed and cheered. Yes. Yes. I can't wait to see the aloof academic god looking embarrassed either. Haha. What aloof academic god? Just a low-class pauper. He can only talk with his grades for now. When he enters society, he'll still have to work for us. Hearing these words mocking Alexander, I sneered. Birds of a feather flock together. It has been like this since ancient times. Even the simplest students have their own circles. William and I were childhood sweethearts and had lived in the same villa area since childhood. Therefore, all the people who played with us were either rich or noble. But I didn't like this kind of circle. However, I had no choice. My parents restricted my making friends. Besides them, no one else would play with me. 10 years ago, at their instigation, I picked up a pickled radish from Alexander's bowl. Then, I put the chocolate I carried with me beside his hand. That was the only interaction between him and me during my entire youth. At that time, he always walked with his head down. Very, very low. As if he would sink into the dust in the next second. 10 years later, I had long forgotten such a person, until we met again at a sweet potato stall. However, at this time, he had already become a well-known technology mogul, a powerful and wealthy new noble. And I, because of my father's downfall and my husband's abandonment, had become the biggest joke in Zhongcheng. 3 goes such a long way to buy this lousy sweet potato. The girl beside the stall, carrying a new Hermes bag, complained. Hey, this is not a lousy sweet potato. This is a golden sweet potato baked by Isabella. Mr. Chu. Is this really Isabella? She looks like a woman in her 30s. It's the real Isabella. After her father had an accident, William didn't want her either. So she has become so down and out like this. How pitiful. Hearing what they said, the Hermes bag-carrying woman walked up to me on her high heels. Boss, give me 10 more sweet potatoes. Bake them well. I'll buy them and distribute them to my nanny and driver. I smiled ingratiating lie. Okay. Miss. You are so beautiful and kind-hearted. Hearing me call her, Miss. She was even happier. 10 more. The man on the other side held her back. Why do you buy so many? You can't finish them all. She pursed her lips in disgust. How could I possibly eat this kind of food for the lower class? Food for the lower class. In the past, I always liked to buy food from roadside stalls to feed stray cats. But I never ate it myself. At that moment, the boomerang of my youth hit me right in the middle of my forehead. I pursed my lips tightly and sped up my flipping and baking actions. Let me help you. When Alexander, dressed in a suit and tie, appeared in front of me, I was completely stunned. He took homeless me to his private villa. There was no imprisonment, no coercion, and it had nothing to do with sex. He just, like a friend, gave me a place to stay and helped me find a decent job. I was very grateful to him, and always thought about how to repay him. But I didn't know what to do. On several nights, when I went out to pour water, I would see Alexander standing in front of the large French window, a lit cigarette between his fair fingers. The cool moonlight spread all over the floor. He was in the coldness, swallowed by loneliness. Many times, I wanted to hug him from behind and comfort him. But I had no position and no qualification. For some time past. Indeed. He didn't want anything from me. And he didn't lack anything either. Maybe he took me home just because he thought I was pitiful. Just like in the past. I liked to pick up stray cats and dogs on the roadside and take them home. Until he fell ill from overwork and got cancer. He still remembered my birthday and insisted that I make a wish and blow out the candles in front of his hospital bed. He said that a princess's birthday must have a sense of ceremony. Yes. Later on, he always liked to call me princess. Because of the torture of the disease. His eyes had become sunken, and he hardly looked human. Even the hand that inserted the candles for me was pale. And his wrist bones protruded sharply. With difficulty, he managed to smile at me. Princess. Och, happy birthday. His voice was as soft as a mosquito. I had to put my ear close to his mouth to hear this sentence clearly. I looked at him with tears in my eyes. But he kept staring at me and smiling. Cue quickly. Blow out the candles. The way he looked at me was as if he wanted to fix my face in his mind forever. Smiling. He closed his eyes. The hand holding mine suddenly lost its strength and hung beside the bed. I felt the taste of sadness. Like trees and grass leaves soaked in heavy rain. So damp that it made my whole body ache. I trembled and blew out the candles. Closed my eyes and made a wish. God. My 27-year-old birthday wish is to go back to 17. Unexpectedly. My birthday wish really came true. When I opened my eyes again, the bad company friends beside me were pushing me. Isabella. What are you waiting for? Go quickly. I can't wait to see his furious look. They smiled maliciously in Alexander's direction. 17-year-old Alexander was sitting in the corner eating. The light was dim, and his back looked lonely. Just like he was at 27. Whether he was penniless or extremely wealthy, he was always alone. Seeing the young and healthy him again, my eyes turned red. I carried my plate and walked generously towards Alexander, who was eating the free pickles in the cafeteria. He saw that I wanted to sit beside him. In the already narrow space, he moved in a little more. On his large plate, besides rice, there were pickled radishes, pickled cabbages, and a bowl of oily free pickled mustard to soup. At that moment, I just felt a piercing pain spreading through my whole body. After he got cancer, he could have tried harder with chemotherapy. But the doctor said that his physique was too poor because of malnutrition in his youth. And he had a lingering illness. In the end, he didn't even survive the second round of chemotherapy. Looking at his sallow and emaciated face, I felt a lump in my throat. Well, could you let me eat? I tried hard to control my emotions, but still couldn't finish my sentence. Surely he must think I'm a lunatic right now. I adjusted my mood and didn't speak anymore. Directly, under his astonished gaze, I picked up a radish and put it in my mouth. It was salty and astringent, and tasted like chewing wax. Alexander. I'm sorry. I'm late. 6 when I raised my eyes. I only saw his cold expression. Classmate. You can get pickled radishes for free over there. Please don't play such boring jokes. By this time, quite a few students in the cafeteria had stopped eating, and were looking over at us. And the chatter was loud. Especially at the table in front of us. They were talking the loudest. Isabella is really something. She dares to provoke the aloof academic god. Only your high school classmates call him an academic god. His nickname in primary and junior high school was Disaster Star. Why do they call him Disaster Star? Isn't it because he killed his own parents and also killed? When he heard the word Disaster Star, he clenched his fists, and the veins on his fair skin bulged. Before the female classmate at the front table could finish speaking, I stood up. Classmate, Didn't your parents teach you not to gossip about your classmates behind their backs? Still not satisfied, I added another sentence. You have parents. But I don't see that you have any upbringing. The girl I had scolded didn't dare to provoke me, and only dared to mutter in a low voice. She must have taken the wrong medicine. Didn't she go to tease Alexander just now? I was even angrier and was about to step forward to have a good talk with her. A cold touch came to my hand. It was Alexander who held me back. Sit down and eat. His tone was flat. And his expression had also returned to calm. After sitting down, under everyone's watchful eyes, I put all the sweet and sour spare ribs and braised pork from my bowl into his plate. I looked at him with an ingratiating expression. This is compensation for eating your radish. I hope you don't mind. Oh, by the way, although we've been classmates for so long, it seems we haven't formally met. Hello, 17-year-old Alexander. I'm 17-year-old Isabella. I raised a bright smile and extended my friendly hand to him. My words were like a machine gun. He stared blankly at my opening and closing mouth. I'm full. After a moment of silence, he threw down these four words and left, leaving me standing there in a daze. And the chocolate that I hadn't had time to give him and was almost crushed in my hand. 7 in my previous life. Although I thought it was not right to do so, I still listened to William and picked up a lot of food from Alexander's bowl. Because of disgust, I didn't eat any of it after picking it up. Later, out of guilt, when I left, I gave him a chocolate. William also sneered that it would be the best thing Alexander had ever eaten in his life. But 10 years later, when I was tidying up Alexander's study, I saw that chocolate on his desk again. Alexander had put it in an exquisite glass cover and filled it with special gas, so that it would never decay. At that moment, countless thoughts flashed through my mind, and all kinds of emotions surged. The chocolate in my palm allowed me to glimpse the secret he had hidden. But now, the huge disparity in social status, and the great gap made me suppress all my thoughts. Besides, it was just a chocolate. What could it really prove? I'm no longer a rich young lady. What qualification do I have to walk side by side with him? Isabella, you're so mean. You poured the food you had eaten into the disaster star's plate. When it comes to insulting people, you, the young lady, are really good at it. I looked at him in surprise. William sat down beside me with a plop. So, in their eyes, my behavior just now was an insult to Alexander. Then, did Alexander think so too? I'm such an idiot. All I could think about was to let him eat better. But the way I expressed it was so unpleasant. James sat on the other side and said slowly, "But why did you help that disaster star, just now?" Those girls were right. Alexander killed his own parents and also his younger sister. If you get close to him, he'll bring you bad luck sooner or later. James was also part of our circle. He was the principal's son, and had a great influence in school. He had a violent temper and liked to bully his classmates from time to time, under the pretext of playing a little game with them. Later, after my family fell on hard times, William's attitude towards me changed overnight. He began to urge me to take the initiative to get close to and please James, just to get a big deal. Until that time when our two families went on a trip together. William mentored the next room, and James walked into my room. But I still stupidly had illusions about them. After all, we had been friends for so many years. Only then did I realize that our circle had long been rotten to the core. I gave James a disdainful look and retorted angrily. So superstitious? Then why do you still always do such heartless and evil things? Aren't you afraid of being struck by lightning one day? James' face immediately turned green. Isabella, what did you say? Say that again if you dare. Seeing that we were at loggerheads, William quickly pulled me away to smooth things over. No, James. She's out of her mind today. Don't take it to heart. I shook off his disgusting hand. You're not any better. You're a scumbag. Both of them were stunned by my sharp insults. They didn't seem to understand why I suddenly seemed like a different person today. Before they could react, I quickly returned to the classroom. This wrought uncircle. I really didn't want to stay in it for one more second. 10 by the time I got back to the classroom. The class bell had already rung. There was no choice but to explain to Alexander after class that I didn't mean to put the food I had eaten into his bowl on purpose. This was my most hated math class. During the class, although I wasn't in the mood to study, I still forced myself to listen carefully. In my previous life, because I was weak in some subjects, I didn't go to a good university. After graduating from college, I got married to William. I was supported by my father in the first half of my life and by my husband in the second half. This is how a person becomes useless. So after leaving that circle, because I had no special skills and no excellent academic qualifications, I ended up selling sweet potatoes. Since God has given me another chance, I must seize it. I stared wide-eyed and listened for half a class. Unfortunately, friends will leave you. Husbands will betray you. Only math won't. Because if you don't understand math, you just don't understand it. Listening to the math class was almost like listening to celestial script for me. Sighing, I looked around. My eyes fixed on the left front diagonal direction. That strange yet familiar figure was sitting upright, concentrating on looking at the blackboard and calculating from time to time on the white paper. He was slender, his face thin and pale, lacking blood, and there was an indelible light's iron color hidden between his eyebrows. Compared with his powerful, or 10 years later, he was a bit more green and sulfate-based now. Isabella, what are you looking at again? Stand up and tell me. Because I was too absorbed in looking at Alexander, I was caught by the math teacher accidentally. I stood up calmly and replied with a grin. I'm looking at Alexander. Everyone was in an uproar. Only Alexander was still quietly working on the problem. But his fair ears were visibly red. I was already bad at math. And this bold statement made the old teacher even angrier. Come on. Tell me. What are you looking at him for? Don't leave until you can explain it clearly to me today. I said with a smile. Because he's good looking. As soon as I said this, the whole class exploded. As expected, I was asked to leave the classroom. But because of my father's status, soon another teacher took me to the office to enjoy the air conditioning. 11 after class. I couldn't wait to find Alexander and explain to him about the meal. He was lowering his head to work on the problem and didn't look at me. He just replied faintly. It's okay. I didn't think that way. I let out a sigh of relief. It's good that you didn't misunderstand me. Surprisingly easygoing. Why did I always think he was cold and difficult in the past? Seeing that he was still working on the problem, I was too embarrassed to disturb him again. I put the chocolate in my hand beside him and bent down, smiling at him. This is my favorite chocolate. It's for you. He glanced at it, and his eyes returned to the book. Thank you. I don't eat it. It's very delicious. Really. Just have a try. I directly peeled off the tinfoil on the chocolate and stuffed it into his mouth. My fingertip brushed across his lips, and a tingling sensation spread from my finger to my whole body. He looked at me in shock. I was also stunned. Time seemed to stop. And he even forgot to chew. My face was burning hot. But since things had come to this, I had to bite the bullet and said, it's delicious. Right? I didn't lie to you. I'll bring it for you every day in the future. After saying that, I ran away quickly. 12 after school. I was blocked by William on my way home. I frowned at him. What do you want? He crossed his arms, looking unhappy. What on earth is wrong with you today? Why are you so nice to that disaster star? I'm willing. What's it to you? He pressed my shoulders. Today you offended James because of Alexander. Alexander will be his next target for his game. No. Is he crazy? If he has the guts. Come at me. As soon as I heard Alexander's name, I got worried. William's eyes were dark. He pinched my chin and said word by word, Isabella. Don't tell me you've fallen in love with this kind of trash. Isabella. I curled my lips in disdain. Rather than love someone like you. A scumbag? He was completely enraged by me. Angrily. He pushed me against the wall and kissed me hard. Memories of the past instantly flashed through my mind. I was so disgusted that I etched. I pushed him away forcefully and slapped him backhand. William. What are you doing? He was condescending, using his strength advantage to imprison me tightly between his arms. What am I doing? I've already told you that the woman you saw that day was my sister. Aren't you deliberately using Alexander to provoke me? Wow. This scumbag. I really have to admire him. I was just about to curse him out when I caught a figure out of the corner of my eye. Alexander. He was holding a trash can and walking towards the classroom. When passing by here, his eyes fell on me and William. Just for a second. He calmly moved his eyes away and continued walking. My chest felt stuffy and painful. So, won't he misunderstand again that I got close to him just to annoy William? I found the right moment and hit William's weak spot hard. William bent down in pain. If you're sick, go see a doctor. Okay? After saying this, I chased after Alexander. Alexander. After running for a long time, I finally caught up with him. I grabbed his sleeve and explained. I don't like William. He's a scumbag. He forced me just now. Alexander continued walking. His legs were long, and his fast walk was like my trot. While walking quickly, he replied, Isabella. I'm not interested in the affairs between you two as a couple. You don't need to tell me. He's not my boyfriend. But then I remembered that we hadn't officially broken up yet. So I added. Although we haven't broken up yet, we will soon. He stopped and looked at me seriously. Isabella. I'm not interested, and don't have the time to be the plaything of you rich people. Please don't talk to me anymore in the future. Thank you. He almost spat out the last two words through gritted teeth. After saying that, he walked away without looking back. His words were like a basin of cold water, drenching me from head to toe. I stood for a while, only feeling that the setting sun was extremely dazzling at this time. Why are there always so many misunderstandings between us and we are always missing each other? It's okay. It's okay. I comforted myself. Now I'm not the sweet potato selling girl anymore. So what if I'm rejected? I followed him again. But this time, it brought out his angry roar. Stop following me. Go away. 10 years later. I'm back to 10 years ago. This was the first time he had been so fierce to me in all the time we had been together. I looked at his fierce look, and was at a loss for a while. After a while, I managed to force a smile at him, then bye for now. See you tomorrow. Turning around. My eyes were a bit wet and my heart felt stuffy. 13 for several consecutive days. I put chocolates on his desk. Of course. He threw them all into the trash can. I stared at the chocolates in the trash can for a long time. Disappointment. Sadness. Powerlessness. These emotions rushed in like a sea, surrounding me. It's okay. It's okay. Because James announced that Alexander would be the target of his next game, the whole class began to not cooperate with Alexander's work as the math class representative. When Alexander went to collect homework, someone always deliberately stepped on the homework on the ground and made him bend down to pick it up. Then I would take the initiative to help him collect it. When I put the collected homework on his desk again, he finally opened his mouth. Isabella. I've already resigned from the position of class representative. Please don't get close to me anymore in the future. The small flame that had just rekindled in me was extinguished. After a few seconds of silence, I tried again unwillingly. Why? He looked up at me. His quiet eyes were extremely cold. And the words from his thin lips were as cold as ice. Because I hate you. 14. I don't know how I got back to my seat. All day long, I was in a daze. I don't understand why. Why is it still so difficult even if I'm back 10 years ago? God. Please tell me. What should I do next? Isabella. come to my office. While I was feeling depressed, the appearance of the head teacher made my eyes light up. The head teacher was a young female teacher. My mother always asked her to take care of me by giving her designer bags. She asked me kindly if there was anything she could do to help me recently. With tears in my eyes, I told her my troubles. When the money is in place, things will naturally be in place. Teacher Chen was very efficient. Before the class bell rang, I was already sitting at the same desk with Alexander. And William's seat was far, far away from us. He was so angry that he jumped up and down. But there was nothing he could do. Under the coercion and bribery of the head teacher, Alexander could only put aside his grudges with me for the time being and was forced to become my little math teacher. 15 Alexander taught perfunctorily. But I studied extremely seriously. In this new life, I really don't want to be a useless person who can only be supported by others anymore. However, math is really disgusting. People who are good at it are really good. Like Alexander, getting full marks every time. People who are not good at it are really not good. Like me, who even got a single-digit score once. I was stumped by another easy-to-score question in Alexander's words again. The teacher Wang has explained this type of question twice. And I've explained it to you 3 times. If you still can't do it, I suggest you give up math. The way he looked at me was as if he was looking at an idiot. A surge of anger rushed to my head. Alexander, I'm angry. Don't underestimate me. I must solve this problem today. Half an hour later, Alexander leaned over. Theft. In a fit of anger. You just wrote a solution. Alexander's eyes curved, suddenly looking sparkly. This was the first time I saw him smile. Time seemed to stand still. My mind went blank. And I stared at him stupidly. Maybe my gaze was too intense. He looked over. The moment our eyes met, I guiltily looked away and said sheepishly, they say that when people are pushed to the limit, they can do anything. But I don't think it works for math. As soon as I finished speaking, Alexander lowered his head and blushed all the way to his ears as he laughed. Is his sense of humor so low? 16. Isabella. Is this the reason you broke up with me? William angrily threw all the books on my desk to the ground. His voice was so loud that the others in the library all looked over at once. I glanced at him and said in a mean tone, "What? Are you out of the hospital even though you're not cured yet?" Hearing me say this, he became even more furious and started yelling randomly again. So the other students couldn't study in peace. Alexander, who was at the side, spoke to stop him. William, this is a place for studying. If you don't want to study, please go out. Haha. Study? Do you think that just because you can read some books, you can steal my girlfriend and beat me? My family has worked hard for generations. How could we lose to your 10 years of hard study? In the future, you'll still end up working for me. Here he goes again. This brainless man. Starting his arrogant speech again. I stood up and looked at him, saying word by word, 10 years of hard study can defeat your 3 generations in business. A sneer curled his lips. Oh? So, are you determined to be with this pauper? I curled my lips in disdain. Hilarious. What I do has nothing to do with you. What? Do you think the injury you got last time wasn't enough? Do you want to be barren this time? I stared at him provocatively, and said this viciously, thinking of the pain from last time. He immediately cowered. Isabella, I'm going to tell your parents. Just wait. So ridiculous. After saying this, he left with his tail between his legs. I picked up the books on the ground and got back to studying. When Alexander wanted to say something to me, I spoke first. You misunderstood me last time. I didn't use you as an excuse to annoy him. I have no relationship with him anymore. Last time, he just blurted out those words out of desperation. He kissed me. I was forced by him. I almost wanted to call the police to accuse him of harassment. So, please believe me. I really didn't. I was in such a hurry to clear up the misunderstanding from last time that I was almost incoherent. But before I could finish, he interrupted me. I believe you. Huh? No need to explain. I believe you. Really? The moon in my heart seemed to rise again. And the stars were shining too. Yes. Alexander seemed to think of something again. After hesitating several times, he still asked me, "But why are you so against William?" Memories of being driven out of my home in my previous life, being stripped naked and insulted and beaten by him in the snow, flooded my mind. Being treated like that by the man I had loved from school uniform to wedding dress. I almost died at that time. Suppressing my sadness, I replied, "Because he made my life a living hell." Huh? Alexander was a bit surprised. But I couldn't and didn't want him to know about these humiliating experiences. I could only change the topic by joking around. More importantly, the person I really like is you. True to form, Alexander didn't ask any more questions, and blushed as he lowered his head to do his problems. Seeing that he didn't seem to believe me, on a sudden impulse, I grabbed his hand and confessed seriously, "Alexander, life is short. Let me be with you from now on. Okay?" He was stunned for a few seconds, and quickly withdrew his hand. His neck was also blushing terribly. "Solve this problem first. Then my life will be a bit easier." I reignited my fighting spirit and started doing problems vigorously. 17 The relationship between Alexander and me eased up. Every day, he taught me math. And I brought him lunch every day. "Auntie, for the blue thermos box, please make more sweet and sour spare ribs. A bit sweeter. And also more rice. Twice as much as mine." Nanny me and nodded with a smile. "All right. All right. It seems William has a sweet tooth. Boys at this age can really eat. Auntie will put more for him. It's not for William. As for him, if he ate a single grain of my rice, I'd call the police." "Huh? Then it's for—" "Oh, miss. Don't worry. I won't say a word." I hugged her waist and cooed. "Auntie Mia is the best. The bird's nest in the blue thermos box should also be doubled. He studies very hard and needs more nourishment. Hey, for a big boy, don't let him eat bird's nest with you." Auntie made him eat treasure tea with high-quality ginseng. My mouth was sweeter than honey. "Ah, Auntie Mia, you're so understanding. And your cooking is so delicious. I love you to death. You're always so naughty. Go to school quickly." 18 Under my meticulous care, Alexander's complexion visibly improved. He no longer had to eat the tasteless and oil-less food in the cafeteria. Gradually, he finally gained some weight and was no longer so thin that he could be blown away by a gust of wind. Every day, I unwervingly supervised him to finish his chocolate with a glass of milk. His academic performance was even more astonishing. Before the college entrance examination, many prestigious schools had already extended olive branches to him. With his tutoring, my math grades also began to improve. Now, he not only tutored me in math, but also in other subjects. With his support and my own desperate efforts, my grades soared. In this life, I will rely on myself to create a broad road. Because I know that my father's downfall was his own doing. Rome wasn't built in a day. As early as my childhood, the bomb had already been planted. All I can do is make myself stronger. Strong enough that 10 years later, without relying on anyone, I will also be qualified to stand side by side with Alexander. Even if the mountains and rivers change, even if the stars shift, in a few years, the world will be ours. Alexander, not only do I want us to meet at the peak, I also want to be the one who accompanies you during the climb. In this life, with my efforts, a seed of love has quietly sprouted in our hearts. We have an unspoken understanding. Since the misunderstanding was cleared up, he has started calling me princess again. I asked him, "Why do you always like to call me princess?" After thinking seriously, he said, "On the day you gave me sweet and sour spare ribs, and took the initiative to be nice to me, You were like a princess saving the world from distress. Obviously high above, but extremely kind-hearted. I smiled brightly. But I was a bit puzzled inside. In my previous life, I clearly didn't take the initiative to be nice to him. Then why did he still call me princess later? However, the answer was not important. Because, on this long road of life, I will be with you. 19 on the day the independent recruitment exam of a university ended. In the time it took me to go to the toilet, Alexander disappeared. A bad premonition welled up in my heart. Sure enough, it was William who found James and used the lowest and dirtiest means to bully Alexander. During this period, because I was always by Alexander's side, James couldn't find a chance to attack him. This time, they dragged him into the alley beside the school. When I arrived, Alexander was held by several people. William and James were taking turns hitting him. Alexander's face was distorted. He covered his abdomen with both hands and fell to the ground in pain. His breathing was rapid and unstable, and cold sweat oozed from his forehead. But he still clenched his teeth tightly and refused to let out a moan. James spat. Damn it. So tough? Won't beg for mercy even when dying? As his fist was about to land on Alexander again, I took out my phone to make a call. Hearing the sound, James turned around to look at me and walked towards me maliciously. What? Isabella is going to call the police? I clenched my fists and stared back fearlessly. He continued arrogantly. Call the police? Doesn't Isabella know what my uncle does? As he spoke, he was about to snatch my phone. Immediately, I started to speak with a sob. Hello, Dad. I'm in the alley beside the school right now. Come and save me quickly. Hearing this, James got a bit panicked. William, didn't you fucking say her father went to Beijing? I threatened. Even if he went to Beijing, do you dare to touch me? William, don't you want your company to go public? Coincidentally, at this time, the shrill sound of the police siren was getting closer and closer. The other side immediately panicked and fled in all directions. I helped Alexander up and took him home. Along the way, looking at his wounds, I felt both sad and guilty. If it weren't for me, he wouldn't have been targeted by those two scumbags. If it weren't for me, he wouldn't have been injured today. Princess. Alexander interrupted my rambling. Huh? This is the 100th time you said sorry. Sorry. Am I being too annoying? The 101st time. 20 I didn't expect that Alexander actually lived in the medical staff compound where I used to live when I was a child. The once lively medical staff compound was now dilapidated. And not many families were living there. Alexander's home was old but very clean. After knocking on the door, Alexander's grandma opened the door for us. Grandma had white hair all over her head. Her vision was a bit blurry, and she was not very mobile. But Grandma still knew that he was injured and kept asking him if he had been fighting. Alexander stammered and couldn't answer. I took the liberty to explain to Grandma. Grandma, I'm Isabella, Alexander's desk mate. You don't know. Today, I was bullied by a few hooligans, and Alexander saved me. But while saving me, he also got injured. Grandma, he's my hero. After hearing this, Grandma first gave Alexander a good compliment. Then she grumbled that she would tell the teacher to seek justice for us. Only after I tried my best to persuade her did she reluctantly give up the idea of complaining for the time being and went to cook noodles for us first. After coming to Alexander's bedroom, I began to apply medicine to his wounds. Before I finished, his expression suddenly twisted. You play with the computer for a while. I'm going to the toilet first. With these words, he left, leaving me bored. At this time, an old-style computer that was on attracted my attention. There was a folder on it. I clicked on it and found that a password was required. The stars in the sky blink. Seeing this sentence, my hand unconsciously typed a few words on the keyboard. There is a rag doll by the roadside. It was unlocked successfully. As if the autoplay button had been pressed. A nursery rhyme in my mind was recited again with a gentle female voice. 21 The stars in the sky blink. There is a rag doll by the roadside. Rag doll. Rag doll. Why don't you go home? Is it because you don't have a home? No father and mother? Rag doll. Don't be afraid. Let me lend you half of my mother. Share a home with you. Let me lend you half of my father. Share a home with you. 22 The folder was full of Alexander's mother's diaries. December 25, 1996 Today. I was found to be pregnant, and was also rated as an attending physician. After so many years of hard work, I finally got a good reward. All this good luck was brought by you. My baby. You are really Mom's lucky star. Well, your nickname will be Little Lucky Star. May 20, 1997 Just at the unit. My senior sister-in-law examined me personally. She secretly told me that it was a little boy. The nickname is Lucky Star. Why not name him Henry for the formal name? Benjamin asked me what name to give the child. Henry. 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 Mom and Dad will love you very much. March 17, 2000 To my Henry really likes candy house so much. Just like his father. So greedy for sweet things. I was rated as an attending physician. But this still has to thank my senior sister-in-law for her promotion. It turns out that my senior sister-in-law's husband is so powerful. At such a young age. He has become such an important official. But my senior sister-in-law always has the bad habit of going to the operating table after drinking. No matter how much I persuade her, it doesn't work. What should I do? I'm really worried that something will happen to her. But think about something happy. Benjamin's paintings are selling better and better. Everything at home is going in a good direction. The family savings are also increasing. Henry shouts every day that he wants a younger brother or sister. It's not a bad idea. 23 I don't know when Alexander sat beside me. I was startled and quickly wiped away my tears. But before I could explain and apologize, he spoke first. It turned out that he, like me, once lived in an extremely happy family. His mother was a doctor. And his father was a painter. The family was well off. And he was doted on. Until his mother passed away. All children hope that their parents love each other. But I'm the only one who doesn't. Since the year my mother left. My birthday wish every year has been that my father would stop loving my mother. Unfortunately, God didn't hear it. He will always love my mother. So much so that he is willing to give up me and his life for her. Alexander said this calmly. But my tears fell again. Alexander's mother died of dystocia due to a medical accident during premature birth. But his father blamed all this on Alexander. Disaster star. You know, everyone calls me that. Others can condemn their nicknames, feeling that they are humiliating. But I can't. Because this nickname was given by my father. My father said that I was a disaster star and killed my mother and sister. I was originally called Henry. But he changed my name to Alexander. He said that I killed my mother and also my sister. How could I be Henry all my life? Alexander stared blankly out of the window. His tone so flat as if he were talking about someone else's affairs. Dad was right. Because it was my fault that Mom had a premature birth. It was I who insisted on eating candied haws in the middle of the night. At that time, many stores were closed. Mom, who was pregnant with my sister, crossed several streets but couldn't buy any. On the way back, she had hypoglycemia. Speaking of this, he suddenly stopped. As if there was a lump of bran stuck in his throat. After a while, he started speaking again. Actually, there was still a chance when she was sent to the hospital. Unfortunately, the person who operated on her was her senior sister-in-law who liked to go to the operating table after drinking. At this moment, time stood still. My ears were buzzing. My mind was blank. And suddenly, I couldn't hear anything. 24 I don't know how I left Alexander's home. I walked on the street in a daze. It was not until the cold wind was bone-piercing that I suddenly woke up. Actually, Alexander's mother's senior sister-in-law was my mother. 10 years later. My father's miserable end was because he was my mother's protector. In my memory, my mother was under too much pressure. So she always drank. No one could persuade her. Gradually, drinking became alcoholism. A doctor became an alcoholic. Medical accidents happened again and again, but she didn't care because my father had been protecting her all the time. Later, one accident was fermented by public opinion by chance. The patients who had been hurt in the past also stood up together. In the end, my mother was dismissed by the hospital. But my father still used his last energy to protect her. And my father himself took all the blame and was also involved in other problems. He reaped what he sowed. Justice may be late, but it will never be absent. So, the thunder buried by my parents was earlier and more dangerous than I thought. This thunder not only blew up me 10 years later, but also blew me to pieces right now. I seem to suddenly understand why I could unlock that password. The gentle and beautiful aunt in my memory, who would sing nursery rhymes to coax me when my mother was drunk, was Alexander's mother. Fate is so cruel. At this moment, I finally understood what the chocolate hidden by Alexander 10 years later meant. It was the surging love that he had suppressed. In the future, someone as powerful as him couldn't possibly not know our relationship. So, he had always been getting along with me in the name of friends. So, what he gave me was just enough for my basic living. 25 I stood by the river. The winter wind was bone-chilling. The snow was getting heavier and heavier. As thick as goose feathers. I stretched out my hand. And a snowflake fell into my palm. My past and present lives flashed before my eyes like a revolving lantern. I stood for a long time. So long that I lost all feeling. Alexander, God is willing to give us another chance. It shows that our fate is predestined. Whether you are Alexander or Henry, you are the lover I, Isabella, have determined in this life. If it is a positive fate, I am willing to be with you all my life. If it is an ill-fated relationship, I will go to the underworld with you. 26 Isabella. I looked in the direction of the voice. At the end of the long street. The twilight was thick. Alexander stood there. His figure straight. My tears burst out instantly. He walked towards me. Step by step. I've been looking for you for a long time. What are you doing here alone? My voice was so hoarse that I could hardly speak. Why are you here? When you went out, you seemed to be out of your mind. Later, the more I thought about it, the more I felt something was wrong. So I came out to look for you. Alexander took off his scarf and wrapped it around my neck. I felt warm all over. I looked at him. And my vision became more and more blurred. Alexander, you are the person I will be with even if I have to give up the whole world. Even if I will be spat on by thousands of people. I still decided to give it a try. Even if I will only be a small part of your story from now on. Even if I can only be a small wave in the long river of your life. I also want to tell you. I took a deep breath. Looked into his eyes seriously. And said slowly, Alexander, do you know why I could unlock that password? He looked back at me without answering. It's because that nursery rhyme was taught to me by your mother. Hearing the word, mother, his eyes lit up. I continued. And my mother is the senior sister-in-law in your mother's diary. His pupils shrank suddenly. And his face turned pale. For a long time, he stood there motionless. Like a puppet on strings. His reaction was expected. Time passed by minute. Until we were both covered with a layer of snow. I said slowly, let's go home. Alexander. Goodbye. Turning around. I couldn't stop crying. 27 Today is my 17th birthday. Alexander is not by my side. I made a wish to the heavy snow. God. My 17th birthday wish is that Alexander will be safe and healthy all his life. 28 In the following days. Alexander and I seemed to go back to our original state. I didn't have the face to take the initiative again either. although I still put chocolates on his desk every day. I never saw him eat them or throw them away again. However, the fact that he was still willing to be my desk mate was already a good result. I didn't expect anything more either. Soon, winter passed and spring came. The college entrance examination was approaching, and time became tight. In this life, because I worked like crazy, my grades kept rising, although math was still difficult for me. Fortunately, I knew Alexander's habits. He would mark the big questions he predicted with a red pen. His notebooks were also neatly organized with various methods and easily made mistake points. And his handwriting was neat and the content was well organized. I could peek at them. And he never took his notebooks home, which made it easy for me to get the Study God's Bible. After my weak point was conquered, my overall ranking was getting closer and closer to Alexander's. The hibiscus was in bloom, and midsummer was long. I entered the college entrance examination room again. 29 after the college entrance examination results came out. I was the first in the whole school, because Alexander's results couldn't be checked. Tingshui University and Peking University couldn't reach him by phone, so they came directly to the school to recruit him. Later, I used the family's money and, in the name of the nanny Aunt Zhang, gave Alexander 1 million yuan as financial aid for the top scorer. In the future, he would need this sum of money as startup capital. In this life, I don't want him to exhaust his body again to save this money little by little. As a result, I was beaten by my father so badly that I couldn't get out of bed for half a month. Because I told him that I had used this 1 million yuan for gambling and lost it all. But after all, I was his own daughter. After warning me repeatedly not to gamble again, he let me go free. On the day of the graduation dinner, I drank several bottles of wine. Liquor emboldens the timid. I came to Alexander's building again. He came downstairs. After seeing me, his eyes sparkled. But he didn't speak for a long time. Dark clouds covered the sky, and the sky was torn by a dazzling light. Looking at this all too familiar face, I felt like crying. Alexander, I know you can't accept me, but it doesn't matter. Let me finish what I want to say. Okay? Seeing my tear-filled eyes, he could only nod. Alexander, in the coming days, you must exercise well. Never eat pickles and fermented bean curd every day again. Strengthen your nutrition. Also, no matter how busy you are with your studies and career in the future, you must sleep well. Of course, there is one most important thing. After you graduate from college, have a serious physical examination of your liver every year. You must. The more I said, the more urgent and excited I became. But before I could finish my words, he interrupted me again. Isabella. Huh? Let's go to hell together. His voice was cold, and for a moment I didn't react. Huh? I widened my eyes, and the sudden softness on my lips made my brain freeze for a few seconds. After realizing what was happening, I tightly hugged him back. Big raindrops began to fall. Soon, the rain was like a curtain, pouring down heavily. Princess, it's raining. His voice was right beside my ear. Looking at the city under the hazy water vapor, I felt as if I was in a dream. The rain was getting heavier and heavier, but I didn't want to let go no matter what. Because it took me a great deal of effort and all my luck in this life to be able to hold you so completely like this. 10 years later, my parents still ended up the same. During these 10 years, no matter how much I persuaded, I couldn't change the fact that my mother was an alcoholic. In order not to let more people be hurt because of my mother, I resolutely chose to report her. But I reported it again, and again. And every time it was like a stone dropped into the sea without any response. It was not until my father discovered that the culprit who had cost him so much money to cover up these things was actually me that he almost beat me to death. Only then did I realize how naive I was in the face of power and capital. Money can not only make the devil push the millstone but also turn people into devils. Of course, I also didn't change my father's increasingly deviated path. This was also within my expectation. After all, in the end, I didn't see his remorseful regret. All I saw was his calm acceptance of his defeat. So no matter how many lifetimes I could start over, I couldn't change this pretty term and ending. Alexander still got cancer. But fortunately, it was detected early this time. In addition, during these 10 years, with my meticulous care, and every day, under my supervision, he exercised seriously, went to bed early, and got up early. His body withstood the operation to remove part of his liver. Because of his good physical condition, he recovered quickly. However, the doctor said that there was a possibility of recurrence, so he should live a regular life and keep in a good mood. I smiled confidently. With me here, I won't give any chance to the cancer cells. 31 Alexander. The hardships of fate have pushed you to the edge of the cliff. Then let me sit down with you on this cliff. Enjoy the flowing mists together. And be dependent on each other from now on. The end. Alexander's side story. Actually, the reason why I call Isabella Princess is because of an animated cartoon. When I was a child, I depended on my grandma, and our economic conditions were not good. I watched TV at the neighbor's little sister's place. She always liked to watch the Snow White animated cartoon, so I watched it with her. In my impression, Snow White was always wearing a red dress, waiting for her prince. I knew that I was not a prince, but I still admired the princess's beauty. Later, at the school's welcome party, Isabella, wearing a red dress, walked onto the stage with a microphone. Her appearance was strikingly beautiful, and her skin was glowing white. The originally noisy auditorium suddenly became quiet, and everyone's eyes were on that red figure. She gracefully and calmly gave the party speech. Every word was like the sound of nature. Standing in the middle of the stage, she smiled brightly. At that moment, I thought I saw the real Snow White. And I, looking at the stage at that time, was like a sewer rat, trying to peek at the most beautiful princess in the world. Later, I learned from my classmates that she was really a princess. I thought that in this lifetime, we would never have any intersection. Unexpectedly, she took the initiative to approach me. She was forced by her boyfriend to pick food from my bowl. But in my bowl, there were only the free pickles from the cafeteria. At that moment, my inferiority complex was exposed. I knew that she disliked my food because it was not what the upper-class people like them ate. Fortunately, she didn't eat it either. Because how could a princess eat such things? Maybe it was just on a whim. Before leaving, she gave me a chocolate, too, but it was her whim that caused ripples in my whole life. When we met again, the once high and mighty princess was actually selling sweet potatoes. She was dusty-faced, silently listening to the ridicule of her former friends. Seeing her like this, my heart inexplicably felt stuffy. At that time, I already knew about her parents. I also knew that the unethical doctor who operated on my mother and sister was the princess's mother. But later I figured it out. My father once pushed all his resentment onto me. I had experienced this suffocating feeling myself. Then why should I let history repeat itself on her? I took her home and got along with her like a friend. I suppressed my surging love for her, because I was afraid of scaring my little princess. During our later interactions, I felt the warmth of life. After my career success, the world was grand and splendid. But it was also dark and bloody. No matter what the world was like, I was always an outsider. Like a duckweed. Or a lonely soul. It was not until the princess reappeared that I felt a sense of stability. She let me see warmth and sunshine, and gave me a reason to live in this world. She was my destination. 3. I originally wanted to let everyone know that I love you when the clouds and mists dissipated. But God didn't let me wait until that day. If I could start over a lifetime. My princess. Could you come to my side earlier?